Hi Scott.
Hi.
Um, I know obviously you and I we've met before, but I will introduce myself again. My name is Maria B. I'm the host for today's podcast. Um, so yeah, like I said, I know a little bit about you, but would you like to introduce yourself for the viewers to know more about you before we
Of
begin?
course. So I'm Scott Parker. I've spent about 20 years in HR and recruitment. Through that time, I've worked with small independent companies, startups. I've worked with global multinational organizations.
Okay.
Currently, I am freelancing for myself. And providing global solutions to individuals and companies across the world to help them with
Okay.
their individual or business HR concerns.
Okay. Thank you. So, sorry, can you repeat how many years you've been into in that
It's
industry,
over
the
20. I
HR?
think it's about 23 years now in
Oh,
total.
that's quite a long time. That's quite a long
It's been
time.
a while.
Yeah. Thank you for, joining us today on today's podcast. So I am aware of the time, so I'm just gonna, jump straight up to the questions so that we can gain like information to the viewers and then they can have more understanding on what today's topic is about. Um, so we're basically having a discussion around workplace romance, and one interesting fact that I basically found out was in the year 2022, a HR expert published that workplace relationships and workplace romances have increasingly become a trend within the society, and so she basically has proposed and published that it is very important for like HR leaders or HR experts to help organizations to basically have some policies in place. Why do you think this is the issue?
Well, what is really important within the workplace and HR policy when it comes to workplace relationships? There's a few core issues. One of them is, protecting people from sexual harassment. Another is
Yes.
ensuring that there are professional guidelines so that people know what behaviors they should be expecting, how you should behave, and if you do have to be in a workplace relationship, how you can ensure that's not affecting your work or the work environment of your colleagues.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So in terms of like policies regarding, sexual harassment and like you said, these negative effects that these workplace romances have within the organization and within like in the business side, can you explain how current policies are designed to address and prevent sexual harassment in the workplace?
Of course. I mean, it comes down to a few core issues there. I mean, firstly, it's clear definition and communication. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
what you need to do is ensure that everybody is aware of what behavior is welcome and what behavior isn't welcome within the
Right.
office environment or any working environment. This needs to be communicated effectively. Usually that happens through employee handbooks, training
Mhm.
sessions, and regular communication. Companies should have regular training and awareness programs to ensure everybody is aware of respecting boundaries. And then they
Okay.
need to have mechanisms to deal with any accusation of sexual harassment.
Yeah.
And then also make sure there's reporting procedures that are available that make people feel that they can report incidents and that there can be a fair process. And that fair process may or may not lead to disciplinary action, depending on um, the accusation and what's
Right.
happened.
Okay. Okay. So, you did mention previously that, you have been in the HR department for 20 years. So during your time, have you ever experienced like a report of sexual harassment from for a staff member or from a co-worker? Have
It
you
it
had any?
does happen. It does happen from time to time.
Okay.
Um, Communication is the key on any issue like this. Any accusation always needs to be reported and investigated fully. And then if there happen to be behaviours that aren't in line company policy
Yeah.
and of good ethics, of course, and trying to be, good, effective colleagues to each other, that needs to be dealt with, whether that be through, retraining, whether that be just through having a conversation about what is effective um, working behaviours, or whether that needs to go down to the disciplinary route,
Mm.
if that is a more serious allegation.
Okay, okay. I do agree with you with communication being a key. Communication is literally key in everything. It does make
100%.
everything goes smoothly, and I would also like to add, within the communication as well, transparency is also important. Being let's say transparent. So with the coworker, let's say a coworker was engaging in a romantic relationship at a workplace, what like advice would you suggest to these co-workers?
Mhm. Okay, well, everything as we said, I think most of our conversation will go down to communication. Um, the first thing to do is be extremely professional in your work environment. You
Mm,
need to keep, if you are in a romantic relationship with somebody you work with, you need to try your best to keep a separate boundary between
okay. Yeah.
your work life and your personal life.
Mm,
That can be very tricky even in the best of circumstances. In some cases, you're going to probably want to speak to your HR department or your line leader for
right.
further information on policies. I would always advise anyone to check the HR employee handbook to see what the company policies are in that case.
Okay. And what about like sexual harassment laws? What what examples, are available for the viewers out there? Let's say if someone experienced that kind of issue, how can they proceed moving forward with that?
That would depend very much where they are based. Obviously, I'm aware that, there could be people globally, taking a look. There are vast differences. Um, if you're in the US, for example, um,
Hmm.
the regulations are under Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act, as well as individual state laws. So it'd be worth looking under those. Under the EU or the UK, that could be as broad legislation because every country will have different specific legislation. All
Okay, yeah.
companies, though, all companies should have a HR policy. And if you are experiencing what you believe is sexual harassment or
Hmm.
harassment in any way, the first person you need to reach out to is HR in your organization.
Thank you very much for sharing this information with us all. In terms of respect and equality, um, what's your understanding regarding that? From a human resource standpoint of view.
I think this comes from needing to have a holistic approach, starting with, strong leadership commitments on this area. Leaders need to model the behavior that they expect their employees and their workers to practice. Policies need to be inclusive. The policies need to ensure that people are being treated, equally with
Yeah.
respect. Comprehensive training is probably again a really big start for this. There's areas like unconscious bias, diversity training that are really helpful to help show that message and to make sure everybody is educated on this matter.
Right.
But you really need to ensure that every employee is engaged in this process. You've got the good values within the company, diverse workforce that understands, there is a zero tolerance policy and
Okay.
discrimination and harassment needs to be stamped out as quickly as it's seen.
Okay, so in terms of like let's say the individuals that are engaging in that whole work romance thing, in terms of them having like a respect at the workplace, what would you suggest to them?
It's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult. I think the most important thing is setting those clear boundaries, as we discussed earlier.
Mm.
ensuring that your relationship isn't interfering with your work performance, ensuring that you are following the policies, and really just trying to make sure that you just keep that separate. Just trying as much as possible, keep your work professional, and likewise on the other way, try and keep your home life as free from work as possible at the same time.
Okay, so when you say keep that separate, what does that mean? What does keep that separate mean? To an individual.
There's certain things you can do and are probably sort of good things. No public public displays of affection within the office.
Oh,
Try and keep
okay,
your
yeah.
communication on a professional level. I mean, as
Mm,
much as we all talk, with our colleagues about personal things at home, if there is something that is personal between your direct relationship,
yeah,
probably try and
yeah,
keep that out of the office or work environment as much as possible.
yes,
Respect your co-workers' boundaries as well. People are at the end of the day going to the workplace to work.
mhm,
That should be their core focus, and really ensuring that you are just trying to respect that your co-workers may not want to hear about what's happening domestically, um, and just really focus on those work tasks.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely get what you mean. For me personally, I would agree with the whole keeping things separately, because I think it can make like the relationship interesting between the two individuals, because there is a workplace which is like the professional place, and then there is a personal home where you can do whatever, romance wise. Yeah, just be yourself in terms of however you show affection to each other. You can do that in your personal home. So I definitely do agree with what you're saying, Scott. Professionalism is definitely important at the workplace. So if someone, let's say, comes to the organization and they witness that kind of like a romantic actions between at the workplace, I think it can put a person in a place where they will question their, let's say, how professional the organization is. So I definitely do agree, and it can interfere with ethical things. Um, so I mean, I know you have mentioned setting boundaries and everything. Would you be able to basically give us some clear boundaries, just something that any individual can understand, what kind of boundaries they can put in place at workplace, and maybe perhaps personal space as well. Yeah.
I think it starts with clear communication, having that conversation with your partner in this case,
Mhm.
and deciding what you will both discuss or not discuss while at work and while at home. That's one of the critical boundaries that I think is important. Um, Discussing how you're going to behave around each other, and just having that conversation is probably the first step that everybody
Right.
needs to
Okay.
do. Having that conversation is how can we keep this professional? How can we keep as much of our lives separate in those separate categories.
Mm,
Um, it also depends on how closely you're working with that coworker, and your partner. If you're in the same department, that could probably be a lot more difficult than if you are just employed in the same company in a different department or on a different floor, a different area.
mm,
That will obviously make it easier with the physical boundary that comes with that. Um, Another one is just being aware, and one critical point probably to add is being aware of any hierarchy that may cause an issue within
right.
within the business setting. So if somebody is having a direct relationship with their manager,
Okay.
there could be a hierarchical issue, potentially, or at least a perception within the business. So
Yeah.
on cases like that, again, go back to the employee handbook,
Hmm.
speak to your manager about policies, and check that that isn't against your working policies. Some companies, and it is a tricky tightrope legally for them to walk on.
Mm,
Um, some of them will have a specific policy against having a relationship with a direct report. Again, there could be tricky legal circumstances on that for people's
Mm.
right to a family life. But it's just important to be open, honest, have communication about that. In some cases, it absolutely is necessary that you may need to one partner may need to leave the company to continue the relationship. That
Yes,
is on
yes.
rare occurrences, but there can be circumstances where that might have to be a viable option for you.
Thank you, Scott. So it is very interesting. I was glad to hear that you mentioned a directive relationship because from further investigation, like a research surrounding workplace romances, I discovered that there are some different levels or an intention behind workplace relationship. So I found out that basically some people can engage in a romantic or relationship at workplace for rewards. Like the maybe to gain a higher status. So when you mentioned the hierarchy, I was happy to hear that because um like I said, some people can have an intention that, okay, if I date this boss, I may have some, um, let's say, promotion. Yeah, yeah, promotion. Um, and like different kind of rewards that comes to dating a boss. So regarding, let's say, relationship between the staff member and the boss, like the manager or a supervisor, like how can the boundaries basically contribute in like workplace productivity and also having like a harmonious working relationship that promotes professionalism in the work setting. Yeah.
That makes it extremely tricky when there is a balance of power, a difference in the balance of power there. Um, that can lead to very, very tricky circumstances. Um, I would never recommend anyone get themselves into that circumstance. We can't help sometimes
Right.
what happens romantically. On those cases, it probably is best for one of the parties to
Mm.
look for a new opportunity, because it's not just about the power dynamic in the workplace, and
Right.
the potential for sexual harassment that could happen in that case, but also the perception from the rest of the company.
Mm.
How are your work colleagues going to be looking at you if
That's
you're in a
true.
relationship with the senior manager, senior leader? Um, it brings trust issues amongst an entire group,
Mm.
and can just be a really, really tricky circumstance to navigate.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you, Scott. So, I mean, like to add it to what you've said as well, like it can create like issues like favoritism as well. Let's say, um, um, let's say there's maybe this individual wants to access holiday, um you know and then because they just maybe they just did it normally, they just applied for they asked for leave, on a holiday, on let's say day Christmas days or something, so they get the Christmas holiday off. Some members could actually link that to favoritism, like, oh, because they're dating, so she's allowed to have such thing like that. So in terms of, like, let's say, um the hierarchy, so we're boss dating the staff member, would you say that, let's say, if a manager is interested in a staff member, like his co-worker, would you ad- say that, is it would you advise or maybe suggest to the manager, or the staff member, really, that is it
hmm
worth pursuing, a workplace relationship?
hmm
What would your advice be from a HR point of view?
From a
Yeah.
HR point of view, I would
Yes.
highly advise against anybody pursuing that type of relationship. Again, we can't help who we love, and
Yeah.
it really needs to come down to that decision about what are you going to do, because on those cases you really should have very, very clear boundaries. I know in some cases it can work with extremely tight boundaries, but there's always going to be potential for um, people to believe there is a conflict of interest and a
Right.
higher risk of the reporting of sexual harassment that could happen against you if the relationship turned bad. We all know relationships of any kind can sour, so it's
Mm.
just something to be aware of. If you're working in a large corporate organization, um, you would probably be told that your position isn't tenable if you pursued in with that relationship.
Right. So, like, and, I like that you mentioned that you can't help who you love, because people find their romantic partner in so many different places. And, workplace is one of them. It's actually like the highest place where people find love. So what if, this person, this co-worker is his true love, right? Um, and let's say maybe he comes to you to talk to you. Maybe you and him have a good relationship, okay, with this manager or the staff member, and then they express to you that they are in love with this person and they do feel like this is the one for them. This is the right person they want to settle down with. What are their risks? Like, what? Let's say, what would you say that what is worth picking, like would you put them in a situation where they have to decide between the person or, being a manager?
It is unfortunate, but the first thing I would do if I was in their HR and they came to me
Uh-huh.
about this circumstance is I would sit down with them, read through the policies, the company policies, let them know of the legal standpoint that they may potentially have as well, and then discuss what their options are going to be. Unfortunately, it probably is going to have to be one of those difficult decisions that people need to make
Yeah.
between their career or their romantic relationship, and just follow whichever the company policy is on that one because HR are there to help with every HR issue, every issue that does come up. But one of their primary points is to protect the company as well against any allegations that they weren't acting effectively against the potential for sexual harassment in the workplace or any harassment in the workplace.
Mm,
So it
mm.
is one of those uncomfortable conversations that you would have to have. And find a way to give them a timeline and a solution to make their decision.
Okay, so
It
let's
could be there could be a case of going to another department, finding another opportunity where you don't have that direct line of hierarchy over your partner.
right, okay. Thank you for sharing this information. So let's look at this in a different point of view. Let's say this, these individuals are your close friends. They are your best friends. What would you say to them? What advice would you give to them?
I would probably, as a close friend, tell them to find
Yeah.
another job. One of them. Just personally, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Work is high pressure for everybody these days. The amount we do professionally is 10 times what our parents or grandparents' generation would have done with the
Mm,
tools. The amount of pressure we have day to day makes it hard, for us all sometimes to keep it cool. To add that extra pressure into your working environment and then to add the pressure of work into your personal relationship will
right.
break a lot of people. We've had arguments with our partners in the past, and it's hard enough when you don't have to go to work with them.
Mm,
I would probably advise a friend, a close friend, that one of them would probably need to start looking for a new opportunity.
right. Okay. I'm gonna make it interesting. So let's say you have to pick one of them. Which one would you suggest to have a different to find a new job? And
I think they need to look at where they are in their roles and their career, and find out which one is more effective
okay,
between them. To have an
say
open conversation. So maybe one of them's been in the role for 5 years and they're probably ready for the next step. Maybe
right.
it might be more effective for them to take that next career step. It's tricky and it has to be done on a very personal basis.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I do agree with you. So I'll flip it back on your side. Supposedly, you are at a workplace. Let's say your HR, yeah, expert in your department, and you do find an attraction towards a co-worker. They don't work in your HR field, but they work maybe like a normal support worker or a supervisor. What will you do in that situation? So, but if this person is, you are very infatuated about, you are attracted to this person, and you know that, yeah, like this is the woman or the person that you want to date. You want to have a romantic relationship. What will you do on your end? Yeah.
On my end, professionally, I would need to make sure I check what the company policies are. Again, it also depends on the stage in the relationship that you are. Are you at the very early stage where you're just having a couple of coffees or just occasionally going out for lunch and things are
Mm,
starting to develop, or has something more solid developed at that point? I think there's always a blend of the timeline at what point does a relationship become a relationship,
mm,
in any area. If if you know that something is turning into a proper relationship,
yeah.
um, I would be checking, what the policy is within the company, checking the employee handbook, and just being open with that person about, this is the case. One of us may have to, look at another opportunity. But if not, then how do we keep things professional in the office? Having that conversation. As with any relationship, open communication, discussing what the potential options are, what the potential risks
Mm.
are at that point, and then following through what you jointly discuss.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from what you've expressed is that you will not pursue that relationship. Perhaps let's say your wife, you met your wife at that workplace, would you pursue it? Or, is that what you're saying? Like, yeah.
Every circumstance is different. Every
Yeah.
circumstance is different. If you know that, if you've got that feeling that is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life for, it's
Mm,
that decision. Are you going to make a career decision or a relationship decision at
yeah.
that point? And I
That
guess
sacrifice.
it's difficult. It's going to be a very difficult, situation for anybody there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree.
so it's a tricky one.
Okay. Okay, yes, it seems like we've gone through everything regarding like the HR department, like any legal side or any policies that viewers can be aware of that. Is there anything that you would like to add to what we've discussed today, Scott?
No, I think we covered everything that I thought was important about the questions. Um, so thank you for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing the podcast when it's live.
Thank you, Scott, for joining me once again on the Live Dialogues podcast, and I hope to work with you further in the future topics. Yeah, have a good day.